All right. All right, let's get started. So for those who don't know, my name is Wolf Hamill. I am Elizabeth Hamill's nephew, and I've watched Elizabeth practice and continue to develop her methodology around the Weiss Method for years now. And given I have a background doing interviews in other industries that I'm passionate about, I wanted to help other people better understand what the Weiss Method is, what it treats, how it works, and give people as much info as possible so they can determine if the Weiss Method is a good fit for them and how they can get involved. And so over the course of this episode and the following episodes, we're going to be discussing the Weiss Method in a 5-part series. And while there may be some overlap between episodes, we'll generally follow an outline where the first episode today will cover the story behind the Weiss Method, what it treats, and how Elizabeth got involved as a Weiss Method practitioner. And in the following episodes, we'll discuss how energy works in the body and how this applies to the Weiss Method, the addiction cycle and how that works, taking back control of one's life, and success stories and how the Weiss Method has helped change people's lives for the better. All right, and so we're going to get started today, as I said, kind of talking about addiction and unwanted habits. So Elizabeth, let's just start by talking about addiction in the world today. What do you think are the biggest causes of addiction and unwanted habits being in the world today?
It's a great question, Wolf. Firstly, I want to say thank you very much for doing this with me. I'm really looking forward to working with you. It's going to be a great opportunity for the younger generation to be able to hear your questions into it and hopefully draw out important information for those folks. So can you ask me that question again, please?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think we should just start by talking about addiction in the world today, and specifically what you think the biggest causes of addiction are and unwanted habits.
Yeah, it's a huge question. And, you know, we could spend hours upon hours opening this up. I think one way to think about it is the fact that it's pretty obvious to see that things are really spiraling very quickly in this world down very not so great roads. And, you know, we can look at that from a climate standpoint. We look at it from a political standpoint. We look at it from the standpoint then of the individual. And, you know, how does a person actually think about the world that they live in today and actually be able to make sense of that? And I believe not many people have good tools to do that. And that's a stressor that really isolates people. And I believe isolation is one of the key factors to addiction. People not quite knowing their own mind, what to do, how to be. And there's all kinds of psychological aspects that, you know, anybody can really research online and to figure out why is addiction such a big problem today. Now, in addition to all of that, there are very important systems in the body that we're born with that are very prone to addiction and misuse. And that we're going to open up later on in the series, but it is a root cause. Not so much a cause, but part of the reason why things can go off the rails. And when things go off the rails, then it's very hard to bring them back on without some sort of an intervention for most people, quite honestly. So there's a bit of an introduction. I don't know if you've got any more questions in that vein that might deepen.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it definitely is an epidemic in the world today. I think the next question is just like, how is the Weiss Method helping people take back control of their lives?
And again, big question. And I can give you some some hints as to how that happens. Firstly, it starts with the person. And when I first work with somebody, I usually have a very short, brief consult of, why is it that you want to stop doing X, smoking, alcohol, whatever. And if I don't feel that that person is vested in that, that they have reasons that are deeply rooted internally in their own life, and say it's an external reason, my wife wants me to do it, or my husband wants me to do it, my boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, then I'm going to counsel that person to maybe wait until they're really ready. If it comes from the inside and somebody is like, I just can't do this anymore and I need help, then I can help them, and the Weiss Method can help them because they're vested in it. So it definitely is a partnership, as you would imagine, really.
Absolutely. And for those that don't know, give us a little bit of background on the story behind the Weiss Method.
Sure. So the Weiss Method was developed by a man. His name is Amir Weiss. He is Israeli born and lived there in his early years, and was always interested in energetic healing types of realms. And there's more about his specific story on our website, but he started it, and this was about 35 years ago in Israel. And he now lives in Germany for the last 15 years or so, and practices there. But yeah, that's how it started.
Awesome. And how did you get involved?
Well, I was a cigarette smoker for many, many years. Like, it goes back to the first cigarette I ever smoked I was 11. And wow. I stole a pack of cigarettes from my mother and went behind the barn. And of course, had that exampleship in my life of people smoking around me. And when a parent exhibits certain behaviors, very easy for kids to pick that up. So it was about 10 years ago that I found out about the Weiss Method and had tried many times to quit all kinds of different things, mostly, the patch, or there's a specific medication you can take that, and yes, and I would quit sometimes for months on end, and then something would trigger me back into it, and there it goes. The addiction was never halted. It was just on pause. So I found out about the Weiss Method, found a practitioner, and got treated and quit smoking that way. And I was awed by its effectiveness. So I am an alumni. And so I know how it works, and I do know how addiction works in regards to nicotine, which is a very, very addictive substance. And it's also coupled with the fact that, well, not so much anymore, but it's legal. Well, it is legal now, but it's not as acceptable as it used to be. But it is legal, and it is a very addictive substance. So yeah, that's how I got involved.
Absolutely. And you talked a little bit about the treatment behind it, but like, how does the Weiss Method treat things like nicotine, for example? How does it treat that specifically? What does the treatment look like?
Well, the treatment is actually the same for all of the unwanted habits and addictions. The intention changes accordingly. So the way the treatment, what does a treatment look like? Well, basically, the first session, and some things are treated in one session, some take more than one, but no more than 4 or 5 max. And so the first thing that happens is we sit down and we have what's called a pre-treatment conversation. And that allows people to get a sense of what to expect during the treatment and what to expect after the treatment. And then basically this person is sitting in a chair, fully conscious, fully awake. Their eyes are closed generally. And they basically are asked to go to a very relaxing place in themselves. And then what I do as the practitioner is I work in their bioenergetic field. And it's all about cleaning and rebalancing things, to put things back into a place in which they were meant to be. And that is the role of the practitioner. And it's done with a light touch at times to access certain meridian lines, to be able to then clean and rebalance some of the different organs that have been affected by the addictive cycle. And it basically interrupts that addictive cycle and allows things to go back into a more balanced state.
Absolutely. And I know you just mentioned earlier that nicotine is one of the things that it treats. What other unwanted habits is the Weiss Method used to treat?
Most of the treatments are either for alcohol, for nicotine, for sugar. And inside of that, there's a weight management program which deals with sugar, also can help to people to interrupt the refined carbohydrate cycle, which is basically a sugar, but there's a specific treatment for that. And also inside of the weight management, depends, maybe dairy. If a person is really stuck on something that is not allowing them to be at the weight that they choose to be at. And another one in there is gluten, very important. So those are the main treatments. So weight management, nicotine, alcohol. There are treatments for hard drugs, but those are under the supervision as well with a doctor. And I work in conjunction with that doctor to treat the client. I wouldn't do that necessarily on my own. It's not safe for the person unless they're totally detoxed, and I prefer to do that with the doctor's supervision. And so there's other things that we treat as well, which is compulsive behaviors. Things like nail biting, or some people, they either bite their nails or they pick at their cuticles, and it is a compulsive behavior that can be interrupted. And the Weiss Method deals with that quite successfully. Another one is hair pulling, another compulsive behavior, and is surrounded by a lot of shame, and it's an issue. So things of that nature. There's other compulsive behaviors that Weiss Method has treated successfully, and yeah, that's mostly the bulk of what we do.
Absolutely. So any real unwanted habit that someone has, the Weiss Method is able to go in and basically be able to resolve that.
Yes, if that person is willing to shut it off completely.
Absolutely. And in those treatments, I know we're going to dive into more of how this works with energy specifically and more of the details on this in our following episodes. However, if someone wanted to get treated, how long does the treatment take? What is kind of the treatment cycle?
So the pre-treatment the first appointment is usually, I ask people to put aside 90 minutes. And that includes a break in between if needed for, so that includes the pre-treatment conversation and the actual first treatment. And then I usually want people to just sort of relax for a couple of minutes before they go out the door or do anything so that things can settle in. And so yeah, 90 minutes for the first. And then if there is additional treatments, it's usually like 45 minutes.
Okay, great. And you're based in Portland, Maine right now, correct?
Yep. Yes.
However, people are able to, that aren't in Portland, Maine, that can't visit locally, you are able to do remote treatments as well. Is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, great. And I know we're going to touch on that, the remote treatments, and specifically how those work with energy and everything in the following episodes as well. But I just want to make sure that everyone knows that, you know, even if they're not there in person, they're able to do it remotely, and it's as equally effective.
Yes, and just to briefly say how those work. So, you know, the first 90-minute treatment and pre-treatment conversation. The pre-treatment conversation happens over Zoom. And then we take a little break, and then the actual treatment is over a telephone line. Cell phone is fine. And that is because there's nothing to see for the client in the treatment, and I need my hands. And that's actually the only tool I have that I use are these hands to be able to do the treatment. There's no other, it's all natural, you could say, nothing added. So that's how the remote treatments work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, definitely, I think we got a lot of background in this episode, you know, on how you got involved with the Weiss Method, more information so that people can understand what it is, a little bit how it works. In the next episode, we're going to be touching on how energy works in the body so people can understand how their energy works, and also how the Weiss Method is able to utilize that to solve these unwanted habits, and how that applies to the Weiss Method, as well as more on specifically how these remote treatments work, so that anyone that wants to get involved understands the steps in order to be able to do so. Yeah, but I think it's been a great first episode. For everyone that's listening and watching, tune in for the next one. By the time you're listening to this, you'll be able to see the next episode as well for more on how energy works in the body, how that applies to the Weiss Method and remote treatments.
Great. Thank you so much, Wolf. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Looking forward to the next one.
Yes, so am I.
Talk soon.